the share screen up, or did you want to start with? So feel free to put yourself on mute if you have to do other things. We'll try to keep tabs here. We'll keep sending messages out to the waiting room. It's 10:56. Let's admit them all in. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you guys waiting in the waiting room. We will be starting at 11 o'clock sharp. Thank you.
Yeah, we got a bunch of people hopping in. Hey, Lawrence, can you just give us a brief heads up so we can start recording just before you're going to start?
Oh, yes, thank you. Oh, Alan, I forgot to mention that we will be recording. I hope that's okay with you. Thank you.
Sure.
It better be.
Better be.
Thank you, thank you. For those just coming in, thank you so much for being here. We will be starting at 11 o'clock sharp. Yeah, I mean, I'm not so concerned about that at the moment. How do you want to, I'm not so concerned about that part of it. It's more about because for me, it's all very overwhelming. Adam and Zeb, if you'd like to go ahead and start recording, I think we should be.
Okay. Starting now.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It is 11 o'clock as I see it, so it is now time for our CEMA Professional Development Committee event to start. So my name is Lawrence Arias, and I am the chair of the CEMA Professional Development Committee. I am also the elected CEMA Executive Board Vice President. And again, it is my honor and privilege to welcome you all here today. Thank you so much for being here, for attending again our third webinar session in our series. This one is called Challenging Times for County Finances, and it features our keynote speaker, Santa Clara County Finance Agency Director, Alan Menado, who we're very happy and glad to have here with us. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce some key people who made this meeting possible. First, I'd like to introduce members of the CEMA Professional Development Committee. If I could, when I call on your name, you kindly just quickly introduce yourself. Dolores Morales.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Dolores Morales. I work for the Probation Department and I'm the CEMA President.
Thank you, Dolores. Donna Menzimer.
Hello, Donna Mensimer. I work for Roads and Airports and am your CEMA Secretary and Professional Development Committee member.
Thank you, Donna. Teresa Chagoya.
Good morning, everybody. It's Teresa Chagoya from Employee Wellness. I'm also a member of the Professional Development Committee.
Thank you. Robin Rivas Romano? Oh, you're muted, Robin?
A lot of people would like that, by the way. I am Robin Rivas Romano. I am a member at large on the CEMA board. I'm on the Professional Development Committee. I'm also a CEMA liaison, and I work at the Social Services Agency.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other committee members. However, so let's go to our executive board. As I mentioned, I'm Lawrence Arias. I'm executive vice president. Sorry, vice president on the executive board, sorry. And Dolores has introduced herself as president already. Dolores.
Oh, I was just Dolores, CEMA President, Probation.
And Donna.
Hi, it's me again, Donna Mensimer, Roads and Airports, CEMA Secretary.
And Robin.
It's me again, unmuted, member at large.
And Mary Beth, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Rogers. I work for DFCS out at Social Services, and I am the incoming member at large board member effective January.
Great. Thank you, Mary Beth. Welcome. And now for our CEMA OE3 business reps. Adam Cole, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hey, everybody. Adam Cole, one of your CEMA OE3 business reps. Good to see everybody.
And hi, Zeb Feldman, CEMA OE3 business rep as well. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. And I wanted to congratulate Lawrence. I hope I don't embarrass you too much, Lawrence, on celebrating your 8th anniversary yesterday.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Zeb. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Made it past the 7-year itch.
Right?
I think he's still itching, but it's okay.
I think there's a cream for that. But anyway.
Correct.
So welcome, everybody. And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Alan Minato.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you very much for the introduction. And so why don't we jump right to the PowerPoint presentation. So Violetta. And so how do I want to start off the meeting today, or the presentation? First of all, I have a little bit problem with the presentation. This is the first time that I've ever done a Zoom presentation. So I'm a big audience type guy. And so I'm used to giving presentations and auditoriums and so forth, and seeing people and seeing if anybody's falling asleep or nodding off and things like that. So can't see any of you guys out there, so I'm not even sure if there's anybody even out there, but I'm sure there are. So I think my presentation will end up in either one of 4 ways. And so one way might be, you guys will enjoy yourself. So I'm hoping for that, right? However, the end of my towards the end of my presentation, I might actually scare you a little bit. And so it's Halloween time, so it's a bit appropriate. We'll see if that happens. The other thing I might do is bore you, right? I talk about a lot of numbers, and after a while, one number sounds like another number. So, and then the fourth way you might end up, you might just be indifferent to whatever I say, but we'll see what happens. So let me start off by introducing myself. I'm Alan Minato. I'm the finance director for the County of Santa Clara. I've, as the finance director, I'm in charge of 3 county departments, those being the Controller Treasurer's Department. Okay, and so the main claim to fame for Controller Treasurers is that we produce bi-weekly paychecks for you, right? And so that's probably the most important thing in that department. And so, so let me tell you right now, today is payday, so you guys are all county employees. I guarantee you a paycheck today, and because I have cash in the bank, I guarantee that you'll be able to cash those paychecks. Okay, so a little bit of good news for you. Also in charge of the Department of Tax and Collections, so collect property taxes as well as other county debt. And then lastly, my 3rd department is the Clerk Recorder's Office. Okay, and so Clerk Recorder issue things like marriage. We do marriage certificates. We actually marry people. We issue birth certificates, death certificates. Also record all property transactions. So a very important department as well. So I am a longtime county employee. I'm going on my 36th year now. Okay, so 36 years with the county. Last 2 years, I've been the finance director. Before that period, I was the controller treasurer. So I guarantee you from this presentation, if you really listen, I think you'll learn something today. Okay, so however, like I said, a lot of numbers, several graphs. So if you really get bored with me, sign off, right? So instead of walking out of the auditorium, if you get bored, you could just simply sign off and be really easy for you. So anyway, let's go to the first slide, please, or second slide. Violetta? Okay. So I have 19 slides to present today, so we'll see how we do. Okay. So the first slide shows unassigned, undesignated fund balance for the general fund. So let me explain what that is. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an accounting lesson. And so the general fund is the chief operating fund for the county. It's the largest fund, and the county has a couple of hundred recorded in our accounting system. And so funds are basically accounting mechanisms to track revenues, expenditures, budget, and reserves. Okay, and so funds are set up for specific purposes. And so examples would be like the road fund. The road fund collects gasoline taxes that are used to repair county roads. Again, we track all the revenues and expenses for that fund. Also, we have, I say, Valley Medical Center Enterprise Fund. That tracks all the revenues, expenses, and budget for VMC. And so the general fund mainly tracks general county operations. All the departments within SAMD West heading are all general fund departments, so forth. Like I said, it's the main fund for the county. Now, unassigned, undesignated fund balance translates to reserves. So reserves are what we use, or reserves are available to be used for things like what special projects or programs, one-time projects, ongoing costs at times, like we did last year, or also to help us to weather bad times. So if you look at the graph, the vertical axis shows dollars in millions. The horizontal axis shows the balance at June 30th of each year. So if you look to the far left, it says 2008, so it's 109 million.7. So designated or unassigned fund balance was 109 million and 700K. So next slide, please. So basically, fund balance was stagnant until 2014, and then it just ballooned. It just grew after that period of time. And so since, however, fund balance actually has been growing since 2010. So 7 years of increases, not 9 like it says on the PowerPoint on that second bullet. So let's go back to the graph, Violetta, please. And so again, if you look midway into the graph, 2014, you can see that unassigned fund balance is growing tremendously. However, like I said, for prior 5 years, back at 2010, starting in 2010, it actually has been growing since then, okay? However, in 2018, you can see it dipping down from 572 million to $511 million. So it went down, but then the next year in 2019, it went up again. And so let me tell you what drove that big increase there. So again, from 2018, $511 million, then it went up to $641 million. but $130 million increase. And so what really fueled that was, again, we'll go to the, back to the second slide, Violetta. So third bullet, okay, was fueled by an increase of $275 million in revenues, okay, increased revenues compared to the prior year. 195 million of that was from taxes, in particular property taxes. So 60 million from an increase in assessed valuation of 7.5%, and 69 million from something called excess ERAF, and another 44 million from RDA. So I'll explain some of those terms for you. Excess ERAF. And so ERAF stands for the Education Revenue Augmentation Fund. Okay, this was a mechanism established by the state of California probably 30 years ago. And so basically what the state did was it took our property tax revenues and gave it to the schools. Okay? And so it basically took money from the county and gave it to the schools because the schools were coming up short in their funding. And so excess ERAF is, there's a formula that determines how much money goes to the schools, particularly in Santa Clara County. Once we reach that peak number of school funding, then any of the extra money goes back to what the taxing entities, being the counties, cities, and special districts. So for that year, we got about $69 million from this excess ERAF, which is a big benefit to our budget. We also got 44 million from RDA, property sales. So RDA stands for Redevelopment Agency. Okay, and so redevelopment agencies were set up by cities to steal money from the county. That's how I frame it. Okay, and so basically I took property tax increment, okay, gave it to the RDAs to do certain projects. And I'll tell you what some of those projects were in a minute. And then to fund those projects, but it took the money away from counties and schools for that matter. And so, for instance, the one I always talk about is the city of Santa Clara. They used their RDA to pay for the 49er stadium, some of the 49er stadium. So they took money from schools and from us so that the 49ers could benefit, right? Now they have a brand new stadium, which is a benefit to the community, but schools and the county suffered because of that. And so about 5 years ago, Governor Brown decided that RDAs were taking too much money away from operations, from schools and from counties. And so he said, from now on, all the RDAs will go away. And so for the last 5 years, we've been selling off RDA properties. And so last year, I believe Great America was one of the last to be sold. And so that 44 million is part of the RDA sales that we got from shutting those operations down. So another 50 million of the 275 came from income, investment income. Our cash balances grew and interest rates rose. And then another 30 million came from federal and state funding sources. So let's go back to the prior screen, Violetta. So that's the 641 that I talked about for 2019. However, our estimate for the 2020 year at the end of June, still an estimate because we haven't closed our books. We're thinking that our fund balance will be going down. So general takeaway from these two slides would be this, is that the county continues to possess pretty strong fund balance numbers and reserves. We have a lot of them at this point in time. And so I venture to say that we probably have more than any other county in the state, except for maybe LA, which is a gigantic, has gigantic numbers. And so this is very important because we're probably going to need those reserves. So, any questions for me? Am I boring you too much? Let me know that too. Any questions? Okay. If you do, I guess you could put it on the chat, or I guess somebody will tell me what the questions are, right, Lawrence?
That's right, Alan. So far, no questions yet.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. This slide, or this graph, shows cash for the general fund, as well as something called the TRAN funds. And I'll tell you what trans funds are in a minute. So the vertical axis includes dollars and millions. Okay, the horizontal axis is cash balances at June 30th. So if we go to the far left, for FY 2010-2011, what that means is June 30th of 2011, we had $164 million in cash in the general fund and $222 million in the TRAN funds. And so the orange line is general fund. The blue line are the TRAN funds. And let me let you know that the TRAN funds also include the general fund. So it's inclusive of the general fund. So next slide, please. So basically what that graph shows is the county has a pretty strong cash position. That's despite, you know, all the COVID costs that we had. And I'll tell you what those costs are in another slide. And so first bullet says general fund cash was stagnant until the end of 2013. And then it grew fivefold to 2020. In 2020, we had a balance of $1,130,000,000. So in 2013, it was 218 million. So like I said, it grew at least fivefold. So let's go back to the graph again, Violetta. And so again, you look at the orange, 2013, third notch on there, and you can see it increasing rather nicely until that fiscal year 2018-2019, when we had the $1,130,000,000. Okay, then for this fiscal year, it's gone down to about $1,049,000,000. So back to the thank you, Violetta. The TRAN funds. Now the TRAN funds, now I'll explain what those are in 1 minute, grew by 7.6 times from 243 million in FY 13, not 14, sorry, to an all-time high of $1,856,000,000. Okay, and so go back to the graph and we see that. You see on the blue line from 2013, cash is growing substantially till we get to the fiscal year 2017-2018, where the number is $1,822,000,000. So let me explain what the TRAN funds are. 20 or more funds that we have identified that we can borrow money against, including the general fund. So here's my example for you. And so Valley Medical Center Enterprise Fund runs negative cash every month, anywhere from 220 million to about 300 million. Okay, and so in order to fund their operations, we borrow money from other funds so that they don't run out of money. Okay, and so mainly the general fund right now, because it has really high cash balances. Okay. Same thing with the road fund. About 3 years ago, the road fund ran into a negative cash situation. So for about a year, we took money from the general fund and loaned it to the road fund until new gasoline tax money came in. And so same thing with the general fund. If the general fund runs out of money, then I'm going to use one of those other 19, 20 other funds and borrow money to help the general fund out. And now you're thinking, Alan is crazy, right? Because I have $1 billion in the general fund, it's cash. But there are a lot of things happening right now that might deplete that $1 billion. Okay, and so that's why the Tran funds are so important for me. Some examples are, you have something called the Accumulated Capital Fund. It has about $93 million in that. And what that is it's a fund created by OBA to pay for equipment. And so we take the depreciated value of equipment for each year and take the cash amount, equivalent cash amount, and put it in that fund. So here's how I explain it to you. Let's say you have a laptop. Let's say the laptop costs $100, 5-year useful life, okay? And so 5 years, that means depreciable value is $20 per year. And so Greg is taking that $20, or OBA is taking that $20, and he's putting it in that accumulated capital fund. That's the first year. Second year, another 20. It's 40. All the way to the 5th year. At the end of the 5 years, he has $100 now to pay for the new computer, right? And so he's using that fund so he can replenish our equipment and assets on an ongoing basis. Okay. We have another fund, part of the Tran fund, called General Capital Improvement Fund. So that fund has $500 million in it. That fund is used to fund some of our major construction projects. For instance, like Tasman, right? We need to refurbish the Tasman buildings. So we have money in that fund so we could pay for that. Also, we're building the animal shelter, as well as the Vietnamese Community Center, about 50 million apiece for those two operations, or for those two buildings. So that money is in the General Capital Improvement Fund. Okay, and so why is this slide so important? Because it basically shows that right now, at June 30th, county has a pretty strong cash position. Okay, and so here's my story about cash and how strong I think we are at June 30th. And so I think most of you guys probably know who Gary Graves might be, right? Gary was thank you, Lawrence. Gary was the chief operating officer for the county for a number of years. He retired maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And so Dr. Smith asked him to come back, right? To basically look at a couple of things. He asked him to take a look at the budget as well as some more finances. So Gary called me up one day and he started asking me, how's cash looking, Alan? And so I told him, I thought how much money was going to be coming in by June 30th and, where all the different sources were. And finally he asked me, well, Alan, what do you really think about cash? So my simple answer to Gary was, Gary, I'm not losing any sleep over it. Okay. And so as of June 30th, I was pretty happy about it. However, not to say I'm going to be too happy about it later on, and I'll tell you why in a little while. Okay. Any questions now? Lawrence?
Yes. Looks like I see one question, Ellen. How
Okay.
many months of operating expenses does the 1.0 billion cash balance represent?
Say it again for me, and I'm trying to calculate that down.
Sure.
While you.
How many months of operating expenses does the 1.0 billion cash balance represent?
Some accountant must ask that. Who asked that question, Lawrence?
That was from Stephen Thomas.
Yep.
Hey, Stephen.
Stephen used to work for me at one point in time, so he's trying to catch me in something here, right? And so actually that equals out to about, I'd say, 4 months of operating cash. And I'll show you why later on, okay? Good question. Thank you for keeping me awake. So let's go on to the next slide.
Yes.
Okay. So strong, what? Unassigned, undesignated fund balance, strong cash. Here's another strong point for us. This is a graph put together by the assessor's office, Greg Monteverde and his team. So for all the assessor people out there, thank you very much. This is your product. Okay. So this graph shows the total assessed value for the county. Okay. Right now on my screen, I see a bunch of panels and it's sort of covering up the far right-hand corner over there. But anyway, assessed value is basically the value of all real property in the county. Okay? Assessed value is all the value of all real property, residential and business. Okay? It includes land and buildings. Why is assessed valuation so important? Because it leads to property tax revenues. Okay? And so let's take a look at 2008. Okay, 2008, okay, which is right in the middle of the screen. Okay, so let me explain. Left-hand corner or the left vertical axis shows assessed value in billions, and then the horizontal axis shows the tax year. So again, 2008. See a little cursor there right now. About $300 billion, right, was the total assessed value. And so $300 billion equates to, at 1% tax rate, $3 billion in property tax revenues. Okay? And so if you look at 2020, it's about, I think about 550 billion, which translates to about $5.5 billion in property tax revenues. So it's a major source of revenues for schools, the county, cities, and special districts. Schools get 44%, county gets 18%, cities get 14%, junior colleges get 7%, and then special districts get 6%. And another 10% goes to RDAs that are still that have not quite closed down yet. So major source of revenue for the county, okay? Very important. So as you can see by this graph, it looks like a pretty steep increase over time for the county. So let's go to the next slide. So this slide actually says gigantic growth in total assessment roll. And the reason I say gigantic growth is, when I first developed this PowerPoint, I was giving some, I was doing a session for not only members of Santa Clara County, but also from San Benito County, Santa Cruz County, and San Mateo County. And so our property tax numbers compared to theirs dwarfs them, right? Our numbers are gigantic. And then this slide here demonstrates that. So we reached our first $100 billion in 1992. It's the first PowerPoint, that's the first bullet. We reached the next in 2001. That was 9 years later. Okay. 7 years later, we reached 300 billion. In 2016, 8 years later, we reached 400 billion. So an average about 8 years for each 100 billion, right? However, 500 billion was reached in 3 years, in 2019. So giant escalation in assessed valuation for us. So again, assessed value translates into property tax money. So you see property tax has been increasing steadily following the assessed valuation. So go back to the slide, please. Thank you. And so for 2020, my comment on this is very strong, very good assessed valuation numbers. Okay. Next slide. This slide paints a little bit different view of assessed valuation. And so on the vertical axis, it shows the percentage growth in assessed value. Horizontal axis shows tax year. For instance, for the, let's look at something easy. Let's look at 1992 on here. The percentage growth was about 4%, okay, 4%. And so let's go to the next slide, the verbiage. So basically what the graph shows is that we don't have a real steady increase like the first chart showed. We have ups and downs. We had several years of small increases. Go back to the graph, please. And you can see 1994, that's the third year on the chart, small increase. We also look at what 2004, which is 2/5 of the way in, thank you. And then even look at 2009 to 2011, right? Small growth there, even a negative growth for one of the years, 2010. Okay. We've also had double-digit increases, that being 1998 and 15 to 16% in 2001. Okay. So right there, great. So ups and downs. So let me try and explain that. Why is it going like that, right? And so let's look at that 2001, 15%. In 2002, it went down to 5%, and then 2% in 2004. Okay, a little bit above 2%. And so what caused that? And so right now I would be asking the audience what caused that, but since we're not doing the raising your hand thing today, I believe that was during the period of the dot-com bust, right? The dot-com bubble. Okay, so it's the economic cycle where things trended downwards. Let's look at 2008, 7%. Then it fell to less than 1% in 2009, and then went negative in 2010, right? And so what caused that? The Great Recession. So ever since then, 2013 to 2020, we've had growth anywhere from 6 to 8% each year, so, which is very good for us. And so what do we think is going to happen in 2021? The assessor, Mr. Stone, thinks that it's going to go down. One of the drivers of that is COVID, right? Particularly in regards to commercial or business property. He's thinking that the valuation, people are sheltering in place, office buildings are not as high demand any longer. So he thinks, some of that commercial property values are going to go down. We'll see. Also, if you read in the San Jose Mercury this Saturday, Mr. Stone said that we were in a recession right when COVID hit. So, but those two double whammies, COVID and recession hitting, he believes assessed valuations will not increase at the rate of 6 or 8% each year. So we'll see if Larry's right about that. Okay, guys? Any questions for me these slides?
Yes, we have a couple.
Okay.
Joel Singer has asked, how might Prop 15 affect this assessment?
Not 100% sure on all the propositions, but I think Prop 15 is the split roll. And so I don't know how the split roll is going to affect the assessed valuations. And so, Prop 15 basically says that business properties are supposed to be brought up to market value. So I surmise it's going to really skyrocket some of the assessed valuation numbers. So that's what I think. It might take years for the assessor to come up with those numbers, though, because it's a real heavy lift for them. So, but I think it's going to lead to more assessed valuation as well as more property tax revenues coming in. But it also might chase what businesses out of state too. So That's not good. Any other questions?
Yes, we had, well, actually you had Stefan who actually answered one of them, but I'll read it out loud. What is a special district? And the response was, special districts are governmental entities that perform a specific function in a specific area. Example, the vector control district, vectors, mosquitoes, and other disease spreading wildlife. Okay.
Thank you. Great. He's right about that. Other special districts are like fire districts, sanitation districts, water district, right?
Okay. Zeb has a question. How does rent and mortgage deferments halts due to the COVID-19 impact property tax collections?
And so ultimately, you know, deferments may affect what value of property, right? And so it may, you know, that's maybe one of the reasons that, you know, Larry Stone said that COVID is going to drive down assessed valuation. So I think those deferments could cause such a problem.
That is all the questions right now.
Okay, very good questions. Next slide. Okay, other strong areas. So this is these three bullets that I have here are other reasons that I'm getting a decent amount of sleep at night. Okay, guys? First item is Measure A, the 1/8 cent sales tax. So I think it was back in 2012 when Supervisor Chavez actually pushed for this, right? And so she put a measure on that basically asked the taxpayers to pay an extra 1/8 cent sales tax. Starting 2013, lasts for 10 years until 2023. And the taxpayers approved that. So very good. It leads to about $50 million in tax monies coming to the county each year. Okay? However, last year, the county went back to taxpayers and said, you know, instead of ending it on 2023, why don't we extend it indefinitely? Okay, and so the taxpayers said yes. Okay, and so now that 50 million will come in for forever. So that is one strong area for us. Another strong area is the Measure A affordable housing bond that was passed. So in November of 2016, we went to the voters and said, will you allow us to issue bonds so we could borrow $950 million and then build affordable housing units? The taxpayer said yes. Now the caveat to that is that to pay for the bonds, there'll be a special amount on property tax, on your property tax bills. So you're paying through your property taxes to support that. Okay. And so, but again, it's going to lead to affordable housing units in the county. So, the third bullet is CARES money. CARES Act was passed by Congress, I think back in April. And so we've received so far $158 million in CARES Act money, basically to combat and fight the spread of COVID. Okay. Since that period of time, the state of California gave us $31 million of their CARES money that they received from the feds. So we're going to receive about $189 million in money to pay for our COVID efforts. So, however, I got a lot of costs, so we'll see how far that goes. So those are three strong areas that are helping the county, besides the unassigned and designated fund balance, the growth in assessed valuation, and the cash. Okay. Any questions on that slide?
No questions.
Okay. Halfway done with the presentation, people. So for those who are still with us, thank you for bearing with me. And so when I first did this presentation, about 4 years ago, these were the 4 items that I was worried about. Okay. Worrisome areas from 4 years ago. First item was change in the CalPERS discount rate. So CalPERS changed their discount rate from 7.5% to 7%. And so you're thinking, what, a 0.5% increase? Who cares, right? But has a big effect. So discount rate is the projected rate of return for CalPERS. Okay, and so the original discount rate, 7.5%, then gradually going down to 7%. What that actually means to the county was an extra $40 to $50 million in extra PERS payments per year. And the reason for that is if we have lower projected earnings on CalPERS, the money we give to CalPERS, that means that the CalPERS agencies have to make up the difference. And so that's cost us, again, $40 to $50 million each year for the last 4 years since that discount rate has changed. So that actually transpired. 4 years ago, we were also thinking there's going to be a great increase in countywide debt. Right now, there's about $2 billion in debt on the county books. So 4 years ago, we're thinking of building a new main jail. Right? And so that costs us anywhere from $250 to $300 million to build a new jail. We're thinking about building a new law and justice facility over at the National Guard Armory across from the jail facility. We're thinking that would cost us $400 to $500 million. We also, the hospital was talking about building a new bed building. Okay? So they didn't have enough beds for their patients, so that would have cost us another $300 million. I think more in the lines of 400 million. And then the other items, the animal shelter plus the Vietnamese community center, 50 million piece for those facilities. And so that adds to at least another $1 billion to our debt margin. So, however, main jail is still not built. Law and Justice Center, which was going to be used for the DA, the public defender, and the sheriff, not built. New bed building wasn't built, mainly because we bought O'Connor, St. Louis, and DePaul hospitals. So we didn't need a new bed building because we had other beds available. The animal shelter and the Vietnamese community center, those are being built, but we're using our cash to pay for those. So increase in county debt didn't happen. So happy about that. Third bullet, federal problems. So 4 years ago was the beginning of the Trump administration. President Trump campaigned on one of his campaign issues was getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. So 4 years ago, I thought he was going to do it. Never happened, which is great for us because ACA brings in a lot of money for BMC. So we're happy that didn't happen. Also, the sanctuary city issue was coming up. President Trump was saying he's going to cut funding for anybody who gave sanctuary to immigrants, right? And so that never came through either. Right? He never cut off funding from us, so federal problems didn't happen. So good for the county. And then the last thing that I was worried about is other escalating costs. That is mainly the labor contracts, right? So all the labor contracts were up for renewal. And so thought was they're probably to the county budget. So actually did. However, our county employees deserve their raises and to be justly paid. So I want to tell the CEMA people, you guys did a great job on your negotiations. Your contract looked fabulous. So very good job. So that's a shout out to Zeb and his team, plus the negotiating committee. I really like that thing you did on with that PERS. Just real stout. Any questions about that slide? So 2 out of the 4 things that worried me at that time came true, 2 didn't. So batting 500, doing pretty good.
And no questions so far.
Okay. So go back to the prior slide, please, Violetta. Labeled clouds on the horizon. Next slide. This one is labeled the storm arrives. Okay, when it rains, it pours. And so what do I have here? Upcoming and future budgets. My comment on that is bleak. Governor's exec order on property taxes. Hell if I know what's going to happen. I'll explain all these in a minute. Uses of cash. So that $1 billion in cash that I have, I might lose it all. Okay. However, I can mitigate that, so we'll see. Growing COVID costs, just not ending, never stops. And then the last thing I have is other scary thoughts. I have 5 other scary thoughts, 9 things that are worrying me, okay? So other scary thoughts, just in time for Halloween, right? It's Halloween time, so there you go. Next slide. So, like I said, county budget is bleak at this point in time. That's despite, my record undesignated fund balance, record cash, strong AV assessed valuations. Budget is not looking good right now. So back in June, the initial projection for the FY 2021 budget was a deficit of anywhere from $200 million to $500 million. Okay, so that's not good. So we didn't pass the normal budget that we do in June. Because of all the questionable things that were happening and all the unknown things that were happening, and finally had board hearings in August. In that August hearings, the board approved $205 million in reductions and a loss of 553 FTEs. Okay, I believe all vacant FTEs. So that's a significant paring of budget. In November, okay, the Office of Budget Analysis wants to cut another 200 FTEs and reduce the budget further by $80 million. And so about 12 different departments have been tasked with coming out with those cuts, including finance agency. They want me to pare at least 4 more positions from my budget. I already gave them 10 positions, but they want 4 more. Then in February, we're probably going to have even more reductions, probably directed at CBOs. So we're starting conversation with CBOs right now and letting them know that we have budget problems. And so let's go to the next slide. Upcoming budgets also look bleak. So this graph, or this display, was produced by the Office of Budget Analysis, OBA. So it shows a 5-year projection of what our budgets are going to look like. So on the vertical axis, you have dollars and millions. On the bottom horizontal line, you have the fiscal year. And so the blue columns are expenditures. The orange is revenues, and then the black items down there are basically use of reserves. So for FY 2021, on the far left hand, you can see that we're projecting about a $3.8 billion in expenditures. We think about $3.4 million in revenue is going to come in. And so the difference is use of reserves of $362 million. let me tell you, use of reserves means using cash. It's not money coming in, so it's money going out. So that's a key thing for later on. Okay. You could also see the next 4 years, the projecting deficits of 167, 170, 176, and 180. So that's why I think things looking bleak in the budget picture. Any questions about that?
There are none. I think we're all scared now.
I know. Those of you who didn't leave, right? So, but it gets worse, Donna. Okay.
That's great to know. That's awesome. Thanks.
I work for roads though. Does that mean I'm exempt?
And wait, but I have a question about that. Can I ask him? I work for SSA, so we get money from the feds and the state. So what does that mean for us?
I'll cover that later on. How about that?
Thank you.
Okay, that's like on the last slide. I have a whole thing on fed and state reimbursement. So anyway, that's a good question though. Let's go to the next slide. This is a weird one. Okay, governor's exec order on property taxes. I say 100-foot question mark. This is the one I have no idea about, okay? I'm guessing. So I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay, so back on May 6th of 2020, Governor Newsom issued an order. He issued the order to help people who were having problems from the COVID thing, right? A lot of people were being laid off, massive unemployment going on. So the governor wanted to help out, all the citizens of the state. So he issued his exec order. And basically what it did, the second bullet, it allows delay of paying property tax payments until May 5 of 2021, as all penalties and interests are waived until then, okay? And so basically a lot of people pay their property taxes because they don't want to get hit with the 10% penalty or a 1% interest rate each month, okay? And so now that there's no incentive for them to pay, they might delay their payments until that May period, okay? And so I put in bold the third bullet. This may delay about $6.5 billion in property tax payments until that May 5th date, okay? And so, however, all the governments and all the schools were all expecting to have property tax. We're expecting to have half our property tax collections by December 10th, and we expect the other half to come in by April 10th. Now it's being delayed. And so I have reserves at the county, so I could draw down my reserves. I don't think schools have too many reserves. I don't think a lot of the cities have much reserves anymore. And so that's going to be a significant problem. There could be a significant problem. And here's my quandary. This is why I don't know. I have Supervisor Wasserman. Supervisor Wasserman really believes that property taxes are going to be delayed. Okay? I'm not compelled to argue with them. However, I have auditor controllers statewide. They're thinking it's not going to be a problem. So who knows what's going to happen? Okay, so like I said, 18% of that money comes to us. So the other problem that I have with this is we are called a teeter county. Okay, we're in the teeter plan, and what that means is we have agreed to front any property tax money to schools and to cities and special districts. Okay, so we agreed to pay them their full share. But if we don't have that money coming in, then we have to front that money out of our reserves, okay? And so eventually when it comes in, then we keep it. But the money never comes in, then we have problems, and I'll explain that in a minute. So this is a big problem for me. I don't know if property tax money is going to come in or not. There's ways of mitigating the problem, which I'll explain in a minute, but it's a big question mark for me. So hopefully you guys sort of understand that. So this item is the one that's keeping me awake at nights, right?
We do have a question on this one.
Okay.
For property tax funded departments, what will we need to do if payments are delayed?
What will you need to do? Payments are delayed. And so I imagine, you know, the answer would be don't spend any money, right? But I think it's really impinging on us to take some mitigating actions. So I'm going to cover that in a minute, okay? Any other questions?
Nope, that was, oh wait, there's one more. A lot of property taxes are being delayed, but a lot are being paid, I'm assuming. I know I pay mine. I don't know if that's a question, but maybe that was more of a comment.
So who came with that question?
Robin.
Good job, Robin. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pay my property taxes by December 10th and by April 10th, and then as normal. So most people don't know that they could delay payment of their property taxes. However, there are people who maybe are unemployed. This might help them out, right? So let's go to the next slide. More complications. Uses of cash. Okay. So titled Easy Come, Easy Go. Okay. So in springtime, in spring, we're really worried about COVID. The board was worried about COVID. So Supervisor Chavez, very astute woman, Supervisor Chavez asked administration to do a cash projection for 16 months. Okay, so very good on her part. I would do very, very good. So cash projection. So Jeff says, Alan, do the projection. There I am. I got to figure out this cash projection. In a normal year, very easy. You actually do a 12-month projection already. So not feeling too bad. However, that governor exec order, that's what I'm worried about. I don't know how much money is going to come in. And so I did different scenarios. 5% money not coming in, 5% delinquency rate, 10% delinquency rate, 20% delinquency rate, okay? And no delinquent, right? Because last year our delinquency rate was like 0.5%, okay? So I did a scenario, 1%. So I have these 4 scenarios. What am I going to do with them? Am I going to sugarcoat the thing, or I'm going to show the worst? So happens Gary Graves calls me up again. Gary, I'm always talking to Gary, right? Gary calls me. Hey, Alan, how's your cash going? Say, hey, Gary, Supervisor Chavez wants this projection. What should I show her? He says, well, Alan, you got to show her, you can't hide any bad stuff. You got to tell them. So I presented the 5, 10, and 20% scenarios, okay? So if 5% of the people didn't pay, again, I'm a Teeter County, I got to pay that money up front. If 5% didn't pay, I would end up the year with about $34 million in the bank. So started with $1 billion, go to 34 million. And I'll tell you why in a minute. That's fronting at least 228 million in that Teeter front money I had to pay. If we have a 10% delinquency rate, then I would end up with a negative $314 million in cash. Thereby needing to borrow from my TRAN funds, right? And so under a 20% delinquency rate, where 20% of the people don't pay, that leads to about $1 billion in negative cash I'm going to have. That is pretty tough to take, okay? So let's go back. Right now, let me go to the next bullet, okay? So now I'm given the report, gave it to Jeff, right, to Dr. Smith. Gave it to Dr. Smith, didn't hear from him, but I hear from Gary. Dr. Smith calls Gary, and Gary tells me, hey, Alan, that draft report you came up with, it's only a draft, I gave it to Dr. Smith first for any revisions. Gary says, hey, Alan, you sort of scared Jeff. with your draft report. And so Gary and I talk about it. You know, Gary understood what I was doing because that was his suggestion. I showed the scenarios, and so Gary called Jeff, and Jeff made no changes to my memo. I send it to the board like a couple hours later. I don't hear anything from the board. So no questions. About a week later, when we had a budget session, the board started asking questions about it. Okay. One of the questions came from Supervisor Cortese. Supervisor Cortese basically wanted to know, he saw the negative cash positions under the 10 and 20% scenarios. He basically wanted to know when I thought the county would become insolvent. We had some administration, and Jeff assigned it to me. And so couldn't figure out how to show that on a model or on a graph. And so tried different methods. Nothing looked good. Everything was confusing. So I took a walk one morning just to think about things. And this is what I came up with. Insolvency occurs when we run out of cash. We can't make payroll or pay our bills, right? And so that's the next slide. Okay, Violetta. So this is what I gave Supervisor Cortese. Did a report. What should show? The blue. That shows how much cash is available. $1 billion is available, right? Okay. 1 billion. On the right-hand side are uses of cash. Okay. These are the things that are going to drive that balance down. The first item in orange is the $300 million that I need to loan to Valley Medical Center every month because they have negative cash. Okay. So 300 million out the door. Well, not out the door. The reason they have negative cash is because the revenues come in like a year to 14 months after services are performed. So money will eventually come in, but until that 1 year passes, I'm not going to have cash. The gray box, okay, that is use of reserves. I told you earlier, anytime you use reserves to fund a deficit, it means cash out the door. So when we did the report for Cortese, the deficit was about $384 million. So right now I have 300 for VMC plus another 384, so about close to 700 million that I'm dedicating to 2 different areas. And finally, the yellow, that's the funding of cash for the teeter program. Okay. That's 228 million under the 5% scenario. Leaves me with right about 900 million in uses of cash. I got $1 billion on the left-hand side. So leaves me at the end of the year now with about $100 million in cash after starting with 1 billion. Okay. So this goes back to the question a little while ago, what should county departments do? So the item in gray, using reserves. Okay, so to help out here, if we cut our budget and don't use reserves, then that cash won't go out the door. So Greg and OBA have already cut 200 million. So 384 less 200 million. Now I'm down to about 184 rather than what the 384 number. So reduced. The teeter item, 228 million yellow. I could mitigate that or stop that by leaving the teeter plan. Okay. So I simply need to go to the board and say, I don't want to be in the teeter program anymore and get board approval, and then I won't have to front that cash. The only reason we haven't done that yet is because in actuality, by fronting the cash, we get to keep all the penalties and interest, and so it's been pretty lucrative over the last 20 years for us. So anyway, so that's the way I could reduce, cash out the door. Instead of being 100 million left, maybe I was left with maybe $500,000 left. Okay. So I don't know if you understood that, but it's somewhat a worry, but again, it could be dealt in certain ways. So the question originally was, what can county departments do? My answer is, when Greg and OBA ask for budget reductions, find him the reduction he needs. Okay, let's decrease that deficit. I don't want to lay off people. You know, if you can, give up some of your vacant FTEs. See where we go from there. Okay, next slide. COVID. So for me, COVID is not going away, right? So originally hoped that it would end late spring. You know, I'm part of the EOC. I'm the finance chief of the finance. I am the chief of the finance section at the Emergency Operations Center. So I go every 2 days. I hear all the reports. I keep track of all the costs. And so in springtime, you know, some of the new cases are going down to like 20 or 30 per day. However, I think Easter occurred and 4th of July occurred, and the new case numbers just skyrocketed into the hundreds after that. And so not only did number of cases increase, also costs. So as of September 30th, we have spent $228 million fighting COVID. Plus, I have another $93 million in commitments, right? Those are purchase orders or contracts that are in place. That's a total of $321 million that, you know, we're going to either spend or have dedicated to be spent to fight the virus. That's an average of about $49 million over the last 6 months. So next 3 bullets basically say some of those costs will probably grow, some will be reduced, and some will probably hold steady. But you know, the costs that will grow, things like community support. That's where we've, you know, given money to the community for like food programs or for to the schools so they could do distance learning. Testing, obviously, costs will go up because you want to have a robust testing program, so forth. Okay, so remember, I got $189 million from CARES, but I'm committed to spend or spent $321 million. So I think I've already basically spent that 189 at this point in time. Next slide. Last slide, scary thoughts. I think the question, maybe from Robin or somebody from social services, about how the state and federal thing is going to affect the county. And so first bullet, state budget picture. So state budget picture and triggers if Fed government does not have another relief package. So Governor Newsom passed the budget that's relying on money that he has not received yet from the federal government. Governor Newsom was expecting, I guess, a 4th relief package to come through. However, for the last 2 months, Congress has been arguing over it. And finally, President Trump, I think it was a day or so ago, said no more relief packages. And so with that said, the money that Governor Newsom expected to come in is not going to come in anymore, which means that triggers are going to start, which means she's going to start making cuts of money that flows down to local governments. I think OBA believes $50 to $60 million in cuts are going to come from the state. I think mainly to social services is what OBA has indicated. However, the social services director doesn't think it's going to be quite that bad, so only time will tell. So that's one problem area. Second problem area is what? A second surge of COVID. How that'll affect, you know, people paying their property taxes, as well as, you know, how it affects the community and unemployment rates and so forth. So the key thing here I could say for you again, I'm at BOC, Dr. Cody tells us, he's public health officer, he tells us, you know, that we're going into the orange tier shortly. It's going to allow us to do a lot of things. However, just because you're allowed to do something, double think about it whether you really should be doing it, because we don't want COVID to spread further. Third bullet, excess ERAF reductions by the state. So the state knows that, you know, we're getting $40 to $60 million from this excess ERAF program, and they don't like it. They want to take that money and give it to schools. So that's another hit to the budget. Property tax payments permanently delayed by COVID. People can't work, they can't pay their property taxes. Then federal reductions. Those 3 relief packages cost trillions of dollars of debt. So I don't know what kind of effect that's going to have on federal monies coming down to the county. So those are my scary thoughts. So any more questions for me?
Yes, you have a couple, and some
Okay.
went back a couple slides, so I will do my best to try and figure out where they were. Regarding the property tax, can on-time payments be incentivized?
On-time payments be incentivized. Not sure how we could do that. So we can't do a program where we tell people, if you pay on time, we're going to reduce your bill by a certain amount, because that amount due is actually not only owed to us, but to schools and special districts and cities. And so the full amount needs to be paid. So we can't do a incentive program like that. If you have any other ideas, let me know.
Give him a Clipper card.
There's a couple of questions that I think I'm going to tie together on VMC funding.
Okay.
So there's a question, does the hospital get federal or state money? And since the hospital money is received, albeit late, should it not be a wash?
Okay, I'll answer the wash question. So the problem with being a wash is that, you know, and so, you know, payroll goes on, I gotta pay the VMC employees, right? You gotta pay the VMC vendors. And so not quite a wash, because I gotta front that cash, just like the yellow teeter thing up there, right? I gotta front that cash, which means cash is going out the door. Eventually, I am gonna collect those amounts, right? Hopefully, I'm gonna collect amounts from VMC, or VMC is gonna collect their amounts, and also the teeter. You know, eventually the property tax money will be paid, but until those period of time comes in, it means cash out the door until I make the collections. Okay, what was the first question again?
Does the hospital get federal or state money?
Yes, they do. And so again, Affordable Care Act money, mainly federal as well. No, I think that's actually coming through local level at this point in time. But they get Medicare and Medi-Cal money. It's both state and federal. So they're also getting relief package money to support lost revenues, as well as other expenses they have because of COVID. And so probably use some of that money to offset some of their losses.
Do we have to keep using cash reserves to fund VMC Hospital and cover their deficit?
That is a question for the board rather than for me, right? It's a board decision that, you know, we support Valley Medical Center. And so we are a safety net county. We really try to protect, you know, the poor and the disadvantaged, right? And so if we stopped we stopped funding and helping the hospital, then potentially, you know, those poor and disadvantaged might not get the assistance that they need, which would cause even more problems for the community. So sure, we could stop, but it would cause other problems.
Why are we a teeter county?
And so I should have explained this better when I talked about the teeter program. And so we front the cash, right? It's part of teeter, but when we eventually collect the property tax amounts, we keep the penalties and the interest. And over the last 20 years, penalties and interest on delinquent taxes has been a very good, very lucrative for us. And so that's why we remain teeter. However, it just takes one board meeting to get us out of the program. So if need be, and we're not making all the collections, then we might just do that.
Before the current issues with COVID, do you know what the general fund impact from SSA was? Basically, how much was not covered by state, federal, or grants?
I do not know that answer, but I believe most of SSA's expenses are covered through state or federal reimbursements. So.
Please elaborate more on Proposition 15, and if passed, what are short-term and long-term benefits, drawbacks to the county?
I think that's a better question for the assessor's office than me. That program is really there, so not going to touch that one. I think if you really want to know, you should talk to Larry about it. I think he'll talk your ears off.
For self-funded departments, increasing fees appears to be a quick way to cover operating expenses, but it seems to be a double-edged sword, especially now. What are your thoughts on this?
So my thoughts on that is that you can only raise fees a certain extent, right? You could only basically raise your fee to cover costs. I mean, that's what the law says. So we can't charge a surplus, or we can't charge an excess or a profit. You know, governments aren't here to charge profits or make a profit. So, you know, we should charge costs, and we should be doing that anyway. So you should be reviewing your fees on an ongoing basis and making sure you're reviewing your costs. So I encourage people to look at their fees and make sure they're doing so.
I have a question. I didn't type it because I was asking it, but
okay.
I understand we have about 3,000 vacant positions, which if you multiply that by 170,000, the average weighted, that comes out to about 500 million. Instead of deleting, why can't they put a hard freeze on filling those vacant codes for the next year until we figure out what's going on?
My answer to that is I believe that's what they're going to do. So
okay.
It's very astute. That's what we've done in past budget crunches, and I'm sure that's what they're going to do shortly. Okay. So if you need to fill a vacant position, you better start doing it immediately.
That is all the questions we have. Other than a comment, thank you so much. This was a fantastic presentation.
I really appreciate that.
I concur, yeah.
Thank
Alan,
you.
while we're waiting for more people, just in case that there are more questions, and members, if you do have questions, then please feel free to go ahead and type it in the chat for us. But I did want to just take a moment because I have to apologize. First of all, I missed introducing your team, Alan. So if you wouldn't mind introducing Violetta and Lilia, that would be great.
I'll let you do it, Lawrence. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So Violetta, why don't you introduce yourself? And feel free to put yourself on.
Hello, everyone. I'm Violetta Sabater. I'm the Senior Management Analyst here at the Controller Office, and I support George Dorley and also Alan Manato and his team of executives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Violetta. I also failed to introduce Lilia Chavez. Lilia, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Lilia Chavez, and I am the Senior Executive Assistant for the Finance.
Thank you, Lilia. I would also like to introduce one more person while we're waiting for more questions to come in. I think I heard Jim Piazza earlier. Jim is our elected treasurer on the CEMA Executive Board. Jim, I don't know if you're on. Do you have a moment to introduce yourself? Okay, I might have missed him, but so.
Well, we do have a couple of questions, Lawrence.
Okay, great, thank you.
How does this affect special districts like the library?
How does this affect special districts like the library? The library gets special property tax money coming in, and so a lot of the cuts that may be happening with the general fund departments may be not happening with the library. However, you know, like I said, you get property tax money, so if property taxes are delayed, then that might cause them a problem. Yeah, we got to monitor what those delinquency rates are and how much money is coming in. So anyway, they'd be one of the funds that might be looking for a cash loan from us somewhere down the line. So anyway.
In regards to property tax, if our property tax is included in our mortgage, will banks then also delay paying if there is not a penalty?
Good question. All the questions are really good. So that's a very good question. As part of the governor's exec order, and so he did not give that waiver to any amounts that are being collected by banks as part of a person's mortgage. So those monies need to be paid over to the county.
Okay. Do we collect interest or investment income from market investments, banking assets?
And so so we have an investment portfolio that runs $6 to $8 billion. And so we not only invest for the County of Santa Clara, but we also are the treasurers for school districts and some dependent special districts. And so we invest that money in, yes, market investments. We have a very strict, there's very strict rules on what we can actually invest in, meaning a lot of government securities, federal securities. It also allows us to invest in debt issued by certain corporations that they meet certain credit requirements. So there you go.
I have no more questions.
Thank you very much.
Great
questions.
I would like, looks like I have Jim available. Jim, do you mind introducing yourself? Jim Piazza?
Yes, sorry about that. I didn't realize I was unmuted earlier. I'm Jim Piazza. I'm your CEMA treasurer. I also work for the health and hospital system in IT facilities.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
And all right, let's see. One more question. There was $180 million that the state was looking to take out of the county's operating budget. Did the state end up taking that from our budget?
I'm not familiar with the 180 million. If you give me a little bit more clues on that.
Vihar, let me see if I can unmute you. Vihar, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry, so I am trying to recall the details, but it was about a month and a half to 2 months ago that there was an email that was sent around regarding an effort by, I think, the state to take, and I thought it was 180 million out of the funds that we had to use for other purposes. And there was some kind of debate in the Sacramento General Assembly going on as to whether or not that was actually going to happen. And I'm trying to recall the details off the top of my head, and I don't have the email in front of me.
Someone is suggesting it might be about ERAF.
Yeah. I talk about that one. I know about that one, okay?
Okay.
And so back in spring, I think it was springtime, the Department of Finance, the State Department of Finance was interpreting the rules of the excess ERAF program to their liking. And so, which basically would led to about, I don't know, 60 to 80 million dollars being taken away, from our budget, okay? And so that's maybe what you're referring to. And so what happened with that is Supervisor Chavez reached out to the nonprofits, and they all sent letters in saying, please don't do this. Of course, the supervisors, as well as our county exec staff also made various phone calls to people in Sacramento. So what eventually happened was the state legislature decided that they would refer the matter over to the state controller's office, who are the ones who basically oversee the excess ERAF program, rather than have Department of Finance, who has have absolutely no knowledge or anything to do with that program in the past. And so keep them out of the whole picture and leave it to the state controller to decide. So at this point in time, the state controller is assigned it to our attorneys, and we're waiting for feedback to see, which way the state is going to go on this. We still think they're going to probably try and take that money away from us. However, if we do, if they don't have a strong, compelling argument, then I believe we're going to sue them. And so, I'm not supposed to say that publicly, but anyway.
And that's about 80 million that you're talking about the year after?
60 to 80 probably.
Okay.
Just
Thank you,
depends
Alan.
on the year. Good question.
No more
Great
questions.
presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Well, I think at this point then, since we don't have any more questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So first of all, I would definitely like to thank you, Alan. Thank you so much for being here, for presenting for us. I'd like to thank you as well as your team, of course, Lilia and Violetta, in helping us with your presentation. I'd like to thank again the committee members who've also helped put this together, as well as the board members, and of course, our OE3 business reps, Adam and Zeb. Just a couple of reminders. We do have the previous 2 webinar sessions on our YouTube page. So if you'd like to see those are up. And this one is being recorded, and we will have this up by tomorrow.
Laura, I was going to suggest too, if anyone has any additional information that they would like us to do webinars on, this is our fall series. While COVID and shelter in place is not fun, this actually has opened us up so that we're able to provide you really important information as we move through this. So if there's topics or ideas that you would like to see the Professional Development Committee address, please email us. You can email any of us, Lawrence or myself, about your ideas.
That's right. Thank you so much, Donna. Just a final reminder that, I have also uploaded Alan's presentation as a PDF document in our chat, so feel free to download it from there. Otherwise, we want to again thank everybody for being here today. We really appreciate your participation and your interest in this. Alan and team, thank you so much again for being here. We really, truly appreciate your presentation.
Hey,
And
Lawrence, can I do a final shout out to Violetta and Lilia and thank them for helping me out on this. So Violetta and Lilia, thank you very much. And to CEMA, thank you very much as well, and enjoyed our encounter today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan.
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 Great
Thank you,
presentation.
Alan.
Thank you, Alan.
Ovation.
Bye.
Bye.
Round of applause.
Woohoo!
Have a great weekend,
Golf clap.
everybody.
You too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye, all.
Bye.